If you're in any gaming spaces on the internet, then you've probably heard that Mega Man 2 is one of, if not the single best game on the NES. It's one of the most famous jumps in quality between a game and its sequel. As I talked about last time, Mega Man 1 was pretty novel for the time, but in 2025 it has some huge issues and just feels pretty dated and clunky in general. It's still an overall fine game though. Today you won't find too many people including it in their favorite games of all time, but Mega Man 2 is a completely different story. If you look on any major review sites, you'll see it near the top of the series almost every time. IGN, best in the classic series. Nintendo Life, second best in the entire franchise. And the list goes on. Ever since the Legacy Collection released though, new players have had a chance to take a look at the series and judge it by modern standards, me being one of them. And since my first playthrough, I've noticed more and more people taking issues with this game that some of the older fans don't often bring up. So what's going on? Let's see what Mega Man 2 is all about, and if I think its reputation is deserved. Before we get started though, I'll assume you have at least a passing familiarity with Mega Man so we can save some time. Whether you've watched my video on Mega Man 1 or have played some of the games yourself, I'll skip going over the basics of the series since I've already explained them. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's begin. The first question I want to ask, how good of a sequel is Mega Man 2? A good sequel follows up on the good parts of its predecessor and adds to them, while leaving the bad parts behind. And I'm not going to waste any time in telling you, Mega Man 2 absolutely passes this test. Does it get rid of some of the bad parts of the first game? Yes, it does. The level design has seen an unbelievable increase in quality, for most of the game at least, with stages that all feel very unique with their own stage hazards, structures, combat scenarios, etc. Just to name a few, Flashman is split between multiple paths that weave together, Airman is almost entirely jumping between dangerous platforms over bottomless pits, and Quickman requires you to be, well, quick, or get instantly killed by these giant lasers. The stages also have much better theming, both in terms of gameplay elements that fit the theme of the stage and the visuals themselves. This is a fantastic looking game for the time. You'll see it right when you start the game with a nice animated intro followed by a slick level select screen. Most stages pop with color and are just way more visually interesting than anything you'd see in the first game. The art design is also really solid, with enemies and obstacles that don't just look great, but make sense in their respective stages. Some parts stand out even more than this, like the entirety of Flashman's stage or the giant dragon in Wily 1, both of which are legitimately impressive for 1988 and haven't aged a day since then. On the topic of aesthetics though, any review of Mega Man 2 is required by law to mention what's probably the single best part of the game, the amazing music. This really is some of the best chiptune music ever created. Even in 2025, with scores of great retro-inspired indie games, this music stands out above the rest. My favorites are Metal Man, Bubble Man, Flashman, Quickman, and of course Wily Stage 1. Bubble Man in particular is in contention for my single favorite song in the entire NES library. I'm not even kidding that the music alone makes this game entirely worth playing, and is just a cherry on top of everything else this game improves from Mega Man 1. In terms of gameplay, Mega Man 2 also gets rid of the magnet beam shenanigans from the first game. Nothing required in this game is missable, which is a huge improvement. And for the most part, stages are beatable without their boss's weakness, due to what I think is the biggest gameplay innovation, E-Tanks. These are rare collectibles you can find in the stages that let you totally refill your health at any time. This means if a stage is giving you some trouble, you always have the option of getting an E-Tank from an easier stage, then coming back and essentially brute forcing your way through the boss. In Mega Man 1, stages like Elecman are completely impossible for a first-time player to finish without the right weapons. E-Tanks fix this problem, while also adding an interesting level of strategy. You alone get to decide when you need them most. They remain balanced because you lose all of them when you get a game over, and the designers made sure to only include them in a few locations. Every time you come across one, it actually feels like an event. They also lead to more interesting level design, since the designers get to put E-Tanks in just the right locations to set a stage's difficulty the way they want. For instance, Metal Man has an E-Tank at the very beginning, meaning it's the easiest stage in the game. Quickman forces you to take a much more difficult path if you want to grab one, creating an interesting choice between harder platforming or harder boss. So clearly, Mega Man 2 fixes what's bad with 1 and adds some of its own innovations. Now does it keep the best parts of the first game? I think so. The things I liked about the first game mostly come down to the Mega Man formula itself, which is still pretty unique even today. Mega Man 2 takes this formula and expands and polishes it up a bit. Now instead of 6 main stages we have 8, and we've gone from 4 to 6 Wily stages. This makes it a much meatier game, not to mention that the levels themselves are also a bit longer and more interesting. The other thing I really liked about the first game, the enemy variety, is even better here. We have enemies like these frogs in Bubble Man's stage, these birds that lay eggs that hatch a bunch of smaller birds in Airman's stage, these hanging monkey robots in Woodman's stage, and so many more. This game also places some more importance on the weapons by including a short scene after each stage telling you what you just got from beating it. It's just a static image, but it's still an improvement. This brings us to another new addition, the special items, and I have to say I'm a bit mixed on these. It is really nice to have some more platforming options, and Wily Stage 1 uses them pretty well for some fun level design. A lot of stages also have some optional paths that require these items, which makes the levels more interesting. This also means the order you play the stages matters for more than just the weapons. For example, Flashman is a completely different stage if you have item 1, with so many different paths that open up. Unfortunately though, it's pretty unclear how to get most of these items. They show up from beating specific stages, but I don't think it's ever explained. It makes it pretty hard to remember where to get them if you don't look it up. I also don't like how item 2 is used, but I think that means it's time to discuss each of the stages themselves. So let's get started with the stage most players will finish first, Metal Man. Metal Man is a very fun stage with well thought out hazards, great music, and a pretty basic boss. It's definitely intended to be the first stage you play, since there's an E-tank at the very start, well telegraphed hazards that are placed very deliberately, conveyor belts that test your movement skills, etc. And of course, the weapon is the Metal Blade, which is the most well-known Mega Man weapon, and it's not even close. This weapon is unbelievably overpowered, letting you throw 3 blades at a time in any of the 8 directions, doing a ton of damage, being the weakness of what seems like half of the bosses in the entire game, and letting you throw 112 blades before you need to refill your weapon energy. This means that spamming this weapon throughout the entire game is just the obvious best strategy and comes with practically no consequences. In a hilarious turn of events, even Metal Man gets absolutely dumpstered by his own weapon, dying in 2 hits. Woodman is a fine stage, and the one I decided to play next. There's this dog mini-boss repeated 3 times in a row, which I find kind of boring. I really like the theming of the stage though. Going through a forest before tunneling through one of the trees itself is pretty awesome. The stage is very intentionally designed to be demolished by the Metal Blade, which is funny because after looking it up, the Metal Blade is one of 4 weaknesses for the boss. Yeah. You know, fair enough, because the boss itself is terrible without one of those weapons. The Leaf Shield is also kind of a lame weapon, so good thing he'd learn how to use it more effectively in Smash, where it's about as broken as the Metal Blade is in this game. Just as a quick tangent, Mega Man in Smash loves both Mega Man 2 and 3, with 4 moves from 2 and 5 attacks from 3. The rest of the games only get 1 attack at most, I guess unless you count his basic shots as being from Mega Man 1. Just thought that was interesting. I already talked about Bubble Man's music, which is like the best thing ever. The stage itself is also pretty decent. I really like how the game's post-Mega Man 1 handle underwater sections, and the one here is really fun, including the Metroids? What are those doing here? Unfortunately, some of the enemies are kind of annoying, so it's not my favorite stage in the game, but I do still like it. Airman's stage is really different and I like it a lot. Rather than combat, this one focuses heavily on platforming, with lots of interesting hazards like these head ship things, and these fan enemies that push you back. You have to play patient through the whole stage because it's actually pretty challenging, which I like. Airman sucks though, this boss is just terrible. It's just like Fireman in the previous game, where if you have the weakness you auto-win despite taking a bunch of damage, and if you don't, you just have to get lucky with the random pattern. Now Heatman's stage is an actual modern tragedy. Well, you know, modern for 1988. Most of this stage is pretty decent, but I barely care because it has the worst disappearing block section in the entire series. No, I'm not kidding. It's extremely long and unforgiving, with the block timings varying depending on how fast the screen moves, and being over a bottomless pit the whole time. This extra life is also basically a death trap. Also, at the end, it just straight up trolls you with a block that spawns right above your head, causing you to immediately die. The only likely way you'll beat it is by cheesing it with item 2, flying over the whole stage. And if the best thing I can say about a level is that you can skip it if you have the correct item, that is not a good sign. Quickman stage is pretty infamous, since you have to run past a bunch of insta-kill lasers as fast as possible. But I honestly love it. It's really hard, but short enough that it doesn't become too frustrating. I also appreciate that it commits itself completely to its concept, and taking the harder pathways rewards you with very useful items. The boss is difficult but possible both with and without its weakness, which is nice, although it's maybe a bit mean to put this kind of boss right after a difficult stage. I actually really like the quick boomerang too. It's one of the few weapons that can compete with the metal blade, and I even find it a lot more fun to use. It's a shame you only really use it when the metal blade doesn't work though. I totally understand why this level has the reputation it does, but it's one of my favorite stages in the game. Crashman is a really weird looking but also pretty fun stage. It's the vertical stage of this game, and I find it better than Elecman in every single way, including the way it splits into multiple paths. The ladder climbs are maybe a bit slow, but that's my only issue here. Oh, and also, one of the ladders is a dead end, which I didn't like in Elecman stage, but it's not as bad here since the ladder is much shorter and gives you an E-tank if you have the right item. I also like how the stage turns into the night sky in the second half, after getting darker as you move upwards. That's a cool effect. Flashman stage is the last one I played, and definitely one of my favorites. I love the look of this stage, and the blocks that light up intermittently make me think of the Beat Block Galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy 2. Which is one of my favorite games of all time, by the way. The colors also look really nice here, as I mentioned before. I really didn't expect all the platforms to act like ice here, but it doesn't cause too many issues. The whole stage is a giant maze with many paths that all weave together. Some of these paths require item 1 in the Crash Bomber and lead to some E-tanks, extra lives, and more. It's also just really fun to try and stay on the top path above the enemies, letting you choose between two types of challenge. It's just an intricately designed and well thought out stage, and a perfect way to end the list of main stages. Alright, now we're back to Wily's castle, and I have to say this selection of stages blows Mega Man 1 out of the water. The first level is extremely memorable, if only for the giant dragon at the end that chases you over falling platforms. It's a cool boss too, and can be kind of challenging if you don't know what to do, but definitely not unfair. Of course, the music is legendary too, and is probably the most well-known Mega Man song of all time, which I understand. The stage actually tests your 3 special items very well, with some cool platforming sections that make use of each of them. The second Wily stage is fine, definitely not as memorable though. It mostly consists of walking forward slowly as drills come out of the ceiling and floor, which isn't really fun to play, but at least acts as a good grinding spot if you need one. I like the boss, which is sort of like a combination of the 2 worst Mega Man 1 bosses, but now it's actually pretty fun and is a fair challenge. Next up, Wily 3 is very short, but kind of fun nonetheless. I like the underwater section here where you fall through instant kill spikes, forcing you to be precise, but not to a ridiculous degree. It's a fair challenge that gives you just enough time to react. I don't know why the boss is just a giant Gutsman tank or something, that was a strange decision. You'll win in like 2 seconds if you use the quick boomerang. But unfortunately, Wily 4 is easily the worst level in the entire game. Yeah, even worse than Heatman. The first half is already pretty lame, with a floor you can fall through, followed by a moving platform section that's kind of fun the first time but gets old way too fast. And after that, there's this section with a bunch of annoying enemies that make it extremely difficult to not take any damage before the boss. And boy oh boy is the boss something to behold. The Boo Beam Trap is a room full of turrets that shoot at you at regular intervals. They can only be destroyed by the Crash Bomber, but you have only the exact amount of shots you need, and I do mean the exact amount. If you miss one shot, you just have to restart the level since your ammo doesn't refill unless you get a game over. Also, there are a bunch of breakable blocks that hide the turrets, but some of those are red herrings. There are 3 that you can't shoot, and if you do, yep, you guessed it, you lose. Back to the beginning of the level for you. Just terrible, terrible design. I really don't mind bosses that are designed like puzzles rather than actual fights, but this has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Easily the worst part of the entire game, and one of my least favorite sections in the entire series. To make things even worse, the checkpoint is all the way back before the slow-moving platforms. Yeah, the Boo Beam Trap just sucks. It's a tiny bit better than the Yellow Devil to me, but at least that boss has an exploit that lets you beat it more easily. This has nothing like that. Luckily though, that dumpster fire is followed up by one of the best boss rushes in the series. It's quick and snappy with no downtime at all, and if you know what you're doing, it's very easy to get through all the bosses with little hassle. On your first time through, it's a pretty decent challenge, but not too frustrating either, at least in my experience. So many boss rushes in the series are terrible, and I'd consider it to usually be one of my least favorite things about those games, so it's really nice to go back to this one. After that, you fight the Wily Machine 2, which is a tense but not too difficult fight that works pretty well as a final boss. Oh, but wait, it's actually not the final boss. In a twist that I still find pretty cool, Wily turns into an alien and runs off to another stage. That's right, you get a permanent checkpoint before the true final boss, which is amazing, and I will never understand why more games in the series don't do this. The boss itself is fine. It's kind of weird that it can only be damaged by bubbles for some reason, but after this, it's revealed that the alien was actually a robot piloted by Wily in the shadows, ending Mega Man 2. So yeah, this game was a colossal improvement. I'd personally be pretty surprised if anyone prefers Mega Man 1 over 2. From what I've heard, Mega Man 2 was a passion project from the developers, who worked on it behind closed doors outside of work hours, and to me and so many others, it really shows. There are some games where you can physically feel the passion from the developers, and you can tell they knew they were making something special. Now, Mega Man 2 is certainly not perfect, but I can tell there was a ton of effort here to improve on the first game. If you ask me, literally everything here is better than Mega Man 1, outside of a few annoying moments, of course. But those are still better than the worst moments of 1. The whole game is also a lot more polished. The controls are a huge improvement, cutting down on the slidey feeling of walking around in Mega Man 1. While I think there's still a bit of lag when you stop your run, it's still way better than before and makes the whole game feel significantly better to play. The checkpoints are actually telegraphed now too. Most of them respawn you right after a safe room that serves to let you know you've moved on to the second half of the stage. The game as a whole is more balanced, cutting down on moments that are either too easy or too hard, and feeling like there's a much more consistent difficulty curve. Well, at least as much as there can be within the Mega Man structure. That being said, the game is definitely not without its flaws, like I said, and it's nowhere near the best in the series to me. The Metal Blade, while being fun to use, kind of hurts the game in my opinion. It's just so outrageously powerful that there isn't much of a reason to use any other weapon, except for the few enemies that are specifically designed not to take damage from it. Yeah, there are some enemies that literally just bounce the Metal Blade away and don't take any damage. I think that's kind of a lame solution to the problem. If the Metal Blade had any balancing factor whatsoever, like less ammo, limited range, or only being able to throw one at a time, this would be a great set of weapons. The Quick Boomerang is a ton of fun to use, and is also very powerful with practically unlimited ammo, but is balanced by only being able to fire in one specific arc. The Air Shooter does a ton of damage and travels upwards, which is pretty useful. The Bubble Lead travels along the ground, which is great for smaller enemies. I think this game would be just a bit more interesting if you didn't have an option that did absolutely everything for you. Definitely not the only Mega Man game to have this issue, but still an issue nonetheless. And I don't know if this is just me, but I think the bosses aren't great either. Too many of them are like Elecman or Fireman, which are two ways of designing bosses that I just don't like. And the rest kind of just walk back and forth and occasionally jump while shooting at you. Too many of them just explode if you have the right weakness, although at least this makes the boss rush pretty quick, which I appreciate. Moments like the Boo Beam Trap and the disappearing block section in the Heatman stage are also absolutely terrible to a first-time player. In fact, they're so bad that the first time I played Mega Man 2, I honestly didn't like it all that much. I preferred it to Mega Man 1, but still placed it near the bottom of the classic series. I couldn't see at all how this game was so beloved. But when I played it for the second and then the third time, I realized something. Mega Man 2 is a game that gets better with each playthrough. I think the reason this game is held in such high regard is because the worst parts are only there when you don't know what to do, and the more you peel away at these knowledge gates, the more the best parts of the game rise to the surface. You can skip the terrible disappearing blocks in Heatman, the Boo Beam Trap isn't nearly as bad if you're prepared, the worst bosses all get demolished by their weaknesses, etc. If you learn this game inside and out, like for example, if you grew up with it, it becomes a completely different and much better game. Compare this to Mega Man 1. No amount of knowledge will ever make Iceman or Lekman or Wily 1 fun for me, or any of the bosses much better. On my third playthrough of Mega Man 2 though, I knew how to skip past all the parts I don't like, and realized how much I enjoy Flashman and Airman and Quickman stages and the first few Wily stages as well. All this is to say, I've come around quite a bit on Mega Man 2, and I think it's a pretty good game. While I still like some of the later games in the series a lot more, for anyone who thinks this is the best in the series, I finally understand where you're coming from. To me though, it's good, but not exceptional. Let's see what happens next time though, when we look at Mega Man 3, a game I have a pretty weird history with. See you then, and thanks for watching.